space exploration served as another arena for Cold War competition, starting with the launch of Sputnik on October 4, 1957. It was the world's first artificial satellite and the first man-made object to be placed into Earth's orbit. This launch triggered what came to be known as the Sputnik crisis, and in response to the Sputnik crisis, NASA was created. Then in 1958, the Soviet Union developed and deployed the first ICBM named 5M65. ICBM stands for Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, and as of today, the United States, China, and Russia are the only countries to have ICBMs. Soviets would dismantle the nuclear missile sites in exchange for a pledge from the United States not to invade Cuba. There was also a second deal in which the United States agreed to remove its nuclear missiles from Turkey. One of the first animals in space were fruit flies. On February 20, 1947, the U.S. placed fruit flies aboard a captured German V-2 rocket to study radiation exposure at high altitudes. The fruit flies traveled 68 miles in 3 minutes and 10 seconds. On October of 1962, an American spy plane secretly photographed nuclear missile sites being built by the Soviet Union on the island of Cuba. President Kennedy held several meetings to discuss this discovery and declared to place a naval blockade around Cuba. The goal of this blockade was to prevent the Soviets from bringing in more military supplies. He went on to demand the removal of missiles and the destruction of the site. Both Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev and President Kennedy recognized the possibility of nuclear war and agreed to a deal. The first mammal in space turned out to be a monkey named Albert II. He was anesthetized during flight and implanted with sensors to measure vitals. He reached 83 miles on June 14, 1949, but died upon the impact at re-entry. On July 22, 1951, Sagan and Dzik boarded R-111A1 and became the first dogs ever launched into space. Although they did not orbit the Earth, they were the first mammals successfully recovered from spaceflight. However, on November 3, 1957, a small dog named Laika went on what is known as the Sputnik 2 mission. She became the first animal to orbit Earth but did not re-enter because Sputnik 2 burned up in the atmosphere on April of 1958. Explorer 1 was the first United States satellite to be created in 1958, and the first U.S. satellite to be put in orbit was Vanguard 1, launched on March 17, 1958. The first solar probe was launched in March of 1960. The first weather satellite was launched in August of 1960. In 1961, Venera 1 became the first probe to launch to Venus. In 1960, Marzette 1 became the first probe to launch to Mars, but it never reached the planet. The first astronaut in space was Yuri Gagarin, and he was launched into space on April 12, 1961, aboard the Vostok rocket. He was in space for a total of 108 minutes. However, many prototypes were sent into space before Yuri.